Howdy, folks. Michael S. Robinson Sr. here, and thanks again for returning to my YouTube channel. This is my take on what's happening in America today. 244 years have gone by, and Americans have once again celebrated that memorable day on which our country declared its independence. When put in historical perspective, our country is still very young. When viewed in the context of the future, there are ominous forebodings appearing on the crystal ball. I am an eternal optimist, and yet I cannot ignore what is happening. Few can fail to be emotionally moved by the star-spangled banner waving proudly in the breeze, or a flyover of military jets streaming trails of red, white, and blue smoke. It certainly still brings a warmth and tingle to me, but this 4th of July will be one that is painfully remembered. While fireworks burst in the sky and throngs celebrated, it dismally missed the mark. Some of the current crises in the world and in America might have been momentarily displaced by the traditional sense of pride. But whatever joy should have been pervasive through the celebration was ruined by a sour aftertaste in most American mouths, essentially desecrating the hallowed ground of historic locations. The president's bitter barrage of hate was a new low in our nation's history. Obviously, we've had some really great leaders and some poorer ones, but even the most marginal chief executives of the past have had the decency and respect to focus on the holiday's greatest purpose, which is embracing and promoting brotherly unity and a renewed commitment to keep our country's fundamental principles intact and functioning as they should. Without any sense of patriotic responsibility, Trump instead chose to use our national birthday as a typically tawdry campaign rally, using care to do what he does best, pointing fingers, attacking America's real patriots with threats of new laws and stiff penalties, denigrating his political adversaries, and focusing on the myths and legends of our less than goody two-shoes history. In Trump's Mount Rushmore and D.C. addresses, there was no hint of a unifying message. Instead, his hateful rhetoric was aimed at a verbal execution of the majority of Americans simply for recognizing his glaring unfitness for the job. Like Trump's failed leadership, his inability to make a unifying holiday address will be long remembered as our country works to fix the damage that he has done. It remains to be seen if his rape of America can be repaired. I suppose it could have been even worse, but Trump undoubtedly considered that some actions would be viewed as over the top and simply offensive. Sadly, the effect was really no different than if he had done it outright, using his annual Independence Day appearance to tear up the Constitution, place white-hooded KKK grand wizards in key domestic posts, reinstate the right to buy and sell slaves, and use spurious emergency powers to shut down the guarantees of peaceful assembly and free speech. Of course, that would have been far too obvious, and Trump, bless his little pea-sized brain, seems to have some gut understanding of the difference between the standards of awful and outrageous. Trump continued his typical obsession with conspiracies, reclassifying social reformers and activists as terrorists and enemies of our country and our way of life, people who seek to destroy the magic of history and throw a negative light on all that sacred. The reality is that POTUS, with his verbal diarrhea, creates the disturbing realization that, with such a man in the White House, it's hard to miss who's the greatest enemy of the people. appealing to his rapidly shrinking base, most of whom are rethinking their position as willing martyrs for a lost cause. Trump harangued the country with his poor me routine, stressing how essentially everyone is out to get him and how he is really the only one who can save our country. His lengthy forays into honoring the national heroes who embraced slavery probably brought little admiration. The understanding that Americans should not be honoring the enemies of personal freedom isn't just about Democrats and liberals, it's about all of us. There is real evidence that our country is at a crossroad, and many of the once loyal mini-me base are having questions of personal responsibility on how this debacle should end. It would be wonderful if we had some ability to go back, edit the facts, and create a nicer view of our 244th Independence Day. But doing so would be some sort of complicit endorsement of how Trump mangles facts and disrespects the truth. What he said should be a lasting affront to every American who believes that kindness and decency should be among the essential operating standards of our democracy. We need to remember this, the latest of Trump's abortions. If we don't, history will again repeat itself. Thanks again for listening.